Welcome to the 17th episode of Hands Up. This is probably going to be the last episode of this year, or maybe not. I'm Nitish. Many of you know, I work as a product manager, and I just do this for fun. Today, I have Srishti Kurana with me, and Srishti, why don't you briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Shrishti. I am a food technologist by education, but right now I'm doing something a little different from that. I also freelance in things related to food technology, and I like reading books. I don't read them as much as I want to, but yes, I do like reading them.
And today we are going to, discuss this book called The Housekeeper and the Professor by Ogawa. I don't know if he has a full name, Yoko Ogawa. And this is a book which we discovered through the bookshop's book club. And I felt it's a very interesting book worth discussing. Uh, before we get into, as you can see from the title, there are two important characters. One is the housekeeper, and then the professor. So, before we get into the actual book and the discussion about the book, do you remember, having any, unique relationship or a unique bond with someone who was working in your office or home or something of that sort?
I not so much in the office, but at home, yes, because the two people who work for us now have been working for us for like more than 10 years now. So they feel like a part of the family. Every time I go somewhere for long and I come back, I'm as happy to see them as I am to see my family. So I feel with close proximity, you do end up developing a relationship with people around you.
And like, how do you, what makes you feel that way, that you're part of your family?
I feel when I think about home, I remember them being at home. So it is that sort of a relation, but also in terms of since they've worked for long. So every time I need something, or like when I'm away, I get to hear that they're asking if I'm doing all right, stuff like that. Just, caring about each other. That.
Yeah, that is bound to happen. Like if someone is working at your place for a very long time. Uh, yeah, so let us get into the book. So why don't you share a summary of the book? I mean, there are no spoilers as such in this book. Um, but yeah, how would you describe this book and the story and the overall setup of it?
I would summarize it in as few sentences as possible, but it's about a housekeeper, a lady who is a single mother, and she starts working for a professor, and he has an 80-minute memory, and he forgets everything after that, and it's like everything starts up again. It happened because of an accident a few years ago, so everything that happened after the accident he cannot remember, but everything that happened before that he remembers. I think that's about it.
And also the child, who is also a very important character.
Yes, the single mother. So she has a kid, and I don't even remember if he has a real name, but the professor calls him Root. There is obviously a mathematical reason about why that happens, but I guess we'll get into it as we move forward.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a fairly good summary of it. I would just like to add a couple of things that the professor also has a what do you call sister-in-law,
Who lives in
and
a house
the
that's.
sister-in-law is kind of a caretaker for the professor, but she doesn't want to get too involved. That's exactly the reason why she's hiring a
And
housekeeper.
she is the one who hires the housekeeper for the professor. So the
Yeah,
professor is the one who's being taken care of, but it was hired by the sister in law.
and the housekeeper is also hired through an agency. It's not like a one-on-one relationship between the sister-in-law and the housekeeper. And it's also important to note that this housekeepers who come from the agency to work in the residence of the professor, they keep on changing because none of them can handle him. as he's having a 80-minute memory. And the housekeeper is also coming from a place where her self-confidence has taken a beating. Like she's accepting even bad working conditions. I mean, she has survived all bad working conditions, and she somehow sticks around because she feels that this is a much better deal for her. And she actually starts adapting herself to the scenario of the professor, and she has great patience with him in spite of his memory. And she's also grateful that someone is caring for her child as well. And this equation and situation makes their personal bond stronger.
For sure. I feel in the book, when the son of the housekeeper comes to the professor's house for the first time, that is a bit of a, like, the focal point, the changing moment of the story, because the professor is very fond of the kid. So their relationship gets a lot better after the kid is involved.
And she has a great deal of gratitude for this professor, the way in which he is treating the child.
Also,
And
she's really observant about everything the professor does.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people pay that much attention to their workplace, but she would notice things. She would make sure she comes up with strategies that makes life easier for the professor. So she's also doing a really good job, because maybe she's grateful or she's just good at her job. But
yeah, and they go the extra mile, to take him to a baseball game, or even the dentist. So they're going the extra mile, and this kind of makes the sister-in-law jealous. Like when she stays back at his home when he was sick, she thinks that this housekeeper is having some ulterior motive, and she also gets her fired. And that also shows that the sister-in-law is kind of wary of allowing anyone too close to the professor. And eventually she's asked to come back and work for the professor, because she realizes that, okay, maybe she was just doing her job very well, and maybe the other housekeeper didn't work out as well.
I mean, she was maybe the ninth or the 10th one who had come around already. So it's not like the professor has a really good relationship with all the ones before her. So makes sense that she was asked to come back.
And we don't know what happened with the previous housekeepers. Maybe they just found him way too weird.
Yeah. I mean, you are not given a lot of details in this book about what happened before and what happens after, but from everything that you're told, you can make some assumptions. And one of the assumptions is that it's not that easy to work for the professor, because, first, obviously, because of his 80-minute memory, but also because he's not, the way he speaks, the way he talks is not the usual way that most people talk. And to understand him, you have to understand his world, and maybe not everybody wants to go that extra mile, as you said, to try to understand where somebody's coming from, or try to learn to be able to communicate with this person.
And I mean, I would not go and tell the how it ends and what happens eventually after the housekeeper comes back. At least that much suspense we can leave for whoever listens to this to actually pick up the book and read it. But the 80-minute barrier, I think it's a very kind of a symbolic limitation which has been placed on the character, because you, even as individuals, we don't know what happened exactly 2 years back with an individual, or the limit would change based on how much memory you have and what is the strength of that memory and what you have done to preserve that memory or not. I mean, this book was part of a series of books which was presented as a collection of literature on love. And this is not kind of a typical love story where the boy meets a girl and they fall in love and something happens. This is not that kind of a love. It is more of a human
It is affection.
affection.
How
Like,
you can feel affection for people who you. I mean, just affection. It could be different contexts in which you feel it, but it's not romantic love in any way. maybe the only romantic love that we don't know about is the sister-in-law and the professor. But again, that's another thing we never understand.
That would be only speculative, I guess.
We have a picture, but and also she gets jealous, but we don't know exactly what happened there.
I mean, as far as I understand it was maybe to prevent foul play or something of that sort. I don't know, like it could be a number of things. Um, so this housekeeper has to put an effort to rebuild the relationship with the professor every 80 minutes. Like that is a humongous amount of effort, right? But even the people who don't have any such memory issues, they have to work hard and be patient to keep it going. And I mean, do you think of it in the same way, or is it like only an incidental thing which came up in this book?
The 80 minutes being incidental, or what exactly? Sorry, I got lost in the way.
Yeah, so basically, what I'm trying to say is the housekeeper has to put in a lot of effort to keep on rebuilding the relationship. And even for a normal person, would this be the same?
If they did not lose their memory every 80
Yeah.
minutes, is it still difficult to maintain relationships? Yes, it is. I think you need a lot of patience to have any sort of relationship with anybody, but there are some differences here. Is that first, this was in a very professional capacity.
Hmm.
So at times, for instance, at your workplace, maybe you do not like people, you do not find them easy to communicate with, but you have to do it because it is your workplace, you get paid to do the job. So it is still difficult. I just feel like that added caveat of it being 80 minutes makes it a lot more creative as well, but also sometimes you feel at a loss. For instance, the kid and the professor went out to see a baseball match and they had a great time. 80 minutes would get over and professor would have no memory of it, and these two people would be the only two people having memory of it. And I feel like that's for the good and the bad. Something bad might happen and then they have to live with it and he will not even remember what happened. So I do feel it's a lot more complicated, but yes, in general, every relationship that you have in life would take insane amounts of patience, and it's glad how we end up having it for people, at least the people we think deserve it.
Um, yeah, so this actually, takes me to the mathematical aspects of this book. Like the professor also has great patience on his part because he's trying to teach something about math to both of them. And whenever he teaches something, he teaches with a lot of patience, and he is teaching in a way in which people will understand. It's not like he's coming from like his. I mean, of course, he's a math genius.
But he's never condescending about it. That
Yeah.
is quite beautiful. He's just always curious and he wants you to be curious about it as well.
So I just want to read this particular passage of the book. Uh, this is the professor speaking. He says it was a little puzzle, a game, and his tone sounded more sad than modest. The person who made the problem already knew the answer. Solving a problem for which you know there's an answer is like climbing a mountain with a guide along a trail someone else has laid. In mathematics, truth is somewhere out there in a place no one knows, beyond all the beaten paths. And it's not always at the top of the mountain, it might be in a crack on the smoothest cliff or somewhere deep in the valley. I mean, he kind of becomes philosophical as well on the way. And how did this math part, reach to you as a reader? Like, what did you make out of it?
I feel like it makes mathematics a lot more palatable, one thing, but also almost more than just numbers. I have not grown up loving mathematics, but when I was reading this book, I was like, oh, maybe if I had somebody like the professor in my life, I would actually love it and be curious about it. And I love how he uses it as a tool to communicate with people and form a relationship with them, because if he meets somebody new and he wants to break the ice or just talk and get a conversation going, he would ask them questions about, oh, when were you born, or some other thing that would bring up a number, and then he would try to make some sort of a connection between a number that he has and the number that the other person has, which is something he does with the housekeeper as well, wherein he asks her when she was born, and then there is some number
Amicable numbers.
Yes, and he comes up with the concept of amicable number and explains it to her. I feel like that's his way of trying to form a relationship. Then again, it's not how usual people talk, but that's his way of doing it. And I would have never thought of it like, oh, people like this could exist if I did not read the book.
I mean, I myself was not bad at math, but even a simple formula like n into n plus 1 by 2, which basically tells you the sum of first n natural numbers. I mean, I just didn't try to visualize it in any manner. Like, it was just a formula which gives me the answer, and no one really told me it could be visually presented. I mean, that was like a aha moment for me. Like, okay, math can be taught in
I
this.
feel like I've never thought of maths as a creative subject. It is very analytical, you know or you don't know sort of a thing. Where with this book, you're like, oh, there is a lot of imagination of how you can look at the same problem and look at the same numbers, and then they can be easier to understand, I guess.
I mean, math has always been imaginative. Like, without. See, you can also have a number like square root of -1, which is I. Like, how
I get it, but what
imaginative.
I'm trying to say here is that the perspective through which, the lens through which the professor sees it is not something that I have seen before, and maybe is not something that I was encouraged to see in my life. It was
Yeah.
more about the way that you see it in school or in a college, is where you have problems and you solve them and you get marked for it, and
Yeah.
that's how it is. I would not sit down for an exam and then be like, oh, but what if I can make a lot of dots and explain how triangular numbers work? I don't think I even knew about triangular numbers before I read the book. So
Yeah, so it also gives some hope to people who hated math in their earlier days.
it does make you curious.
Yeah. And it's also important that this is a translated book, right? So, I mean, you can see that any bookstore you visit, you'll see a lot of these Japanese translated books, which is gaining a wider audience among Indian readers, or at least readers in general. Thanks to Murakami and people like him. Uh, like, if you have read other translated Japanese books, and you would have formed some perception of it. Like, how different or how similar is it to any other Japanese fiction or a translated book?
I have read a few Japanese translated books, and I was thinking about it on the way over here. They have mostly been quite different from this one, I feel, because there is always this aspect of something being very out of the ordinary and weird. I mean, in this, okay, you can say that the way the professor behaves and the whole 80-minute memory thing is very not ordinary, but still, the way that the story flows, nothing extraordinary happens. It's just happening. Like, there is no point in the book which is very suspenseful, I would think. You get done with, I mean, you enjoy reading the book, but it's not a thriller. Some of the other ones that I've read have also had some sort of magical realism in them. This one, not so much. But in terms that they're similar, is that all of them have very muted down emotions. Like, it's not, nobody's being too emotional. There is nothing that's too out there. It's very mellow the way that emotions are portrayed, which I feel is also true for this book.
But unlike Murakami, where
Oh, Murakami is a different thing. I don't think I'm old enough, I'll ever get smart enough to understand Murakami, because I've only tried reading one book ever from him, and I just kept going thinking at some point I'll understand what's happening. I never did. And then people tell me, oh, you have to like be wise enough to understand it. I don't know.
I don't know if I was wise or not. And the funny thing about Murakami books is you read and you forget the story after a couple of years.
No, but
Like-
my question always is, when you read a book, you don't have to remember the story. I, for one, never remember the story, but you have something should stay with you.
Exactly.
What stays with you after you read Murakami?
Nothing. That is what I'm trying to say.
Because
Like he actually wrote one book about running.
I
What I
have
talk
heard.
about when I talk about running.
I have not
I
heard.
think I at least that there was some line in it. Even that I'm forgetting. It's basically saying that pain is an inevitable fact, and you can just choose which kind of pain you want to survive or whatever.
Oh,
Some good line was there, even that I forgot.
interesting.
But most of the Murakami books, you enjoy the reading experience.
Uh-huh.
Like when you start the book and you end the book, you go through an experience, and after that,
For sure.
I mean, it's very strange that I remember nothing of any of the plots.
No, I remember because I've only, as I said, attempted reading one. I was gifted one for my birthday from my brother, and it is called The Wild Sheep Chase.
Oh.
And you read through it, and he's talking about stuff that I did not think you can talk about. Like, he keeps talking about this lady's ear and how beautiful they are. And there's something happening with the sheeps as well, but again, never really made sense to me. I guess if I read them again, something might change. We'll see.
Hmm. Um. Yeah, but at least this book I will remember for a very long time,
Oh, yeah.
simply because of the 80-minute thing. And it's the strangest character trait
It's
which
also
has been.
funny that you will remember because he forgets.
Yeah, it is. Um, but then I think we already talked about this a bit. Um, among the whatever mathematical concepts he talks about, uh, which one did you find the most amusing?
I think, again, it's not maybe the most interesting or the most complicated one, but it was amicable numbers for me because it just felt like, oh, we are amicable because these numbers make sense between the two of us. It's like making a connection with somebody that I found really sweet.
Actually, it's surprising that I've marked the same part of
Oh,
the book as well. And I'll just read out this because it's a very beautiful paragraph. This situation is like professor explains amicable numbers to her, the housekeeper, and this is what I think the housekeeper is the narrator of the book, right? More or less.
We don't even know her name, do we? It's just
Yeah,
the
we don't know.
housekeeper
Yeah.
and the professor. No names
And
required.
I think we had a discussion about that as well during the book club meet. That all the characters have been left unnamed very purposefully because I think maybe the author wanted us to see them through their designated roles, or rather, he or she wanted us to focus on the story and the equation rather than the names.
Hmm.
But yeah, this paragraph I'll just read out for the listeners. I wondered why ordinary words seemed so exotic when they were used in relation to numbers. Amicable numbers or twin primes had a precise quality about them, and yet they sounded as though they'd been taken straight out of a poem. In my mind, the twins had matching outfits and stood holding hands as they waited in the number line.
It's so cute. See, I love all that sort of personification of numbers that happens in this book.
And yeah, that also makes it, it brings it down to the ground. Um, and again, see, we saw math as a lot of us saw math either as a competition or as a burden. But here, the character, he is purely enjoying it. Like he's taking all these puzzles from the magazine and solving it and sending it. But he is not doing it for the money. I don't even know if he's checking the money aspect. He's going and putting it in the bank or not. And he's not even enjoying the money which is coming out of it. And he has purely just immersed himself in the joy of doing math. I don't know how many people get a chance to do that. But if work were to be like this, then nobody would be complaining about a lot of things which come with work.
No, but also I cannot imagine a lot of people just being that into one thing. Like, for instance, you can love your job, but most people I know would like to do a lot more things, have a lot more interest, have a lot more other things going on in their life. Whereas for the professor, it was maths and maths. So, like, everything else was just if it's important, he'll do it. But his main pursuit in life was mathematics and to enjoy solving problems.
It was just like math and existence for him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I have heard of people who are that passionate about one thing in their life. I just don't think I can ever be. I need a number of things happening around me for me to feel like, oh,
How many number of things?
I cannot count, man. But work, like, even if I love my work, I can never be that into it. But don't know. I need to have like personal relationships. I need to have work. I need to have hobbies. I need to have things to pass my time. A lot has to happen for me to ever be happy, which is maybe the reason I'm mostly not happy. But
But see, one of the benefits of doing other things apart from work is you get to, draw the benefits. I mean, not purely from a transactional perspective, that, adjacent fields can inspire innovation in your field, the work which you are doing. Or maybe you could acquire skills for your work by doing something else. I mean, that is a very self-helpish kind of a thought.
yeah, mostly when I think about stuff that I like to do or not do, is about how it makes me feel. So there are things that I like, but to an extent. Like, oh yes, I like following up with what's happening in the chess world, but would I go and try to analyze every game that has ever happened? No. So for you to want to go to the depths of one thing, I feel there is some amount of love and passion and insanity that you need to do that. That, oh, this is, I need to know everything about this and this is what I want to do a lot of. I just don't have it. I don't have that much commitment to anything. Which
No,
is
it's.
maybe a
I
problem.
think the more deeper you go, I think it's not about commitment. It's about how much insane you can get and still survive.
Yeah.
Like he's literally on the edge, right? Like the only thing in his life is math,
Yeah.
and God knows. I mean, like entire. If the professor himself were to write a diary or something, let's say since he's losing memory, probably he could write a diary and keep all the records. But he doesn't have time for that as well, because all of his time is just invested on doing his problems.
I feel like all the records he has to maintain are already there, which is him trying to solve these equations. Like, those records are there, and maybe those are all the records that matter. It does not matter to him what happened in his day in terms of, oh, this person came around and I did that and that. I feel like till the time the numbers are there, he would be happy.
But still, I mean, we didn't talk about this, but he's wearing all these notes on his jacket, right? Like it almost reminded me of Gajini, though I don't remember the full plot of the movie. It's like he has prioritized, okay, I'm only going to remember these 10 other facts.
Which will keep things going.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think it was also very nice of him to make a note about things related to the housekeeper and the son.
Not related to this, but something that I was thinking about is there's this point in the book wherein the housekeeper or her son, I don't remember correctly, but talks about, like, the professor talks about some baseball player, and they end up saying that, oh, that's been a long time since maybe the person died or something, and that was a sort of a, break point for the professor where he could not understand what has happened. And then moving forward, they had to take care that nothing like that is mentioned, that he does not realize that this accident happened and he doesn't remember anything after that. That is something I often think about. Is he aware of his problem of, 80-minute memory and I don't remember things beyond a certain point? Or is it something that comes as a surprise to him every time the 80 minutes get over and they start again?
I mean, the book doesn't explore that, but he seems to be like comfortable with it. Like he's not complaining about it.
Yeah, because what I wonder is, imagine this 80 minutes has just restarted and you have sort of woken up from a sleep or whatever, and you look around and you see all these like post-its or notes or whatever, and as things go by you are suddenly introduced to these new characters because you have no memory of them. How do you get comfortable with the idea of so many new things happening to you? Because the last memory you had was probably like the last permanent memory you had was maybe before the accident. Also, again, more things that were never explored. Does the professor even remember the accident? Any memories of the accident? Is that a thing? We don't know.
I mean, the author, doesn't even touch upon it because it's assumed that he has already gone through all the phases which you have talked about, and the story itself starts with the meeting between the.
Yeah, so I mean, in that way, it makes sense. It's just a device of, oh, let's not analyze it too much, but this is what happens.
Exactly. I mean, do you think this book deserves a prequel or a sequel? I don't know about a sequel, but at least it should have a prequel.
I would like to have a prequel and understand what happened there, but I do feel like the way the author has written, the author isn't interested in giving you those information, like those
Yeah.
things, because the questions I have, some of them could have been addressed within this book. You don't need another book for it.
Hmm.
But there have been things that have been like kept unanswered for a reason, and maybe we discussed about it as well, that they don't want you to delve too much into those things. It's more about what's happening here and in this story. So
Live in the moment, kind of a thing.
that's what which the professor really has to do, because he's not going to remember anything anyway, so might as well just live in the moment.
So, let's say you're trying to recommend this to someone, and they have literally no idea about this book, or they're this is not a well-known author, right? It's not like okay, read Shakespeare kind of a thing. How would you pitch, or like what would you tell to someone who is interested or someone who's considering this?
I already recommended this book to my dad as soon as I got done with it, and he also read it after I did and quite enjoyed it. But I knew that he's the sort of a person who has that, like, he does think of things in numbers, and he loves mathematics, and he studied physics and all that. So I could kind of make out he's going to enjoy it, and from what I heard, he did. So that there I did not need any convincing. I just said, oh, seems like something you'd enjoy. He read it, he liked it. But if I had to sell it to somebody to like try to convince them to read it, I would tell them about how it is unexpected, which I guess most books are, because who's reading a predictable book? But it's unexpected in ways that even if you do not enjoy maths, or even if you do not care much about Japan, you would still find a very heartwarming story here.
Yeah, it's mostly a heartwarming story. But then, I mean, a related recommendation would be The Music of the Primes by, I forgot his name, Marcus du Sautoy. Like, it is purely about how prime numbers are impacting our world, and it doesn't have much of, I don't think it has any equations, maybe one or two here and there. And he speaks about how prime numbers are affecting us in daily life. It is a very enjoyable read,
Oh, it's nice.
and it was very accidental how I found it. But I also got a chance to meet him in JLF
Oh, nice. When did you
a
go?
couple of years. I think it was 2024 January. When I went to JLF, I met him, and he writes about math very beautifully, and he has also written an entire book about symmetry, like how symmetry comes across in the world, and how it affects us, and how people have gone about understanding and trying to understand symmetry in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, those could be adjacent reads, but this is purely a heartwarming book, purely focused on the human emotions, and math is just one of those other characters.
It's yes, you call it a character. I call it a sort of a tool to like connect people. But yeah, it's maybe a language, the language that the
It is.
professor speaks.
It is a language for sure. Is there anything else you want to add about this book? I mean, I am done with all the things which I wanted to discuss.
No, I just like that how sometimes, like in life and in this book, happens that you end up meeting somebody who you did not expect to meet, and then maybe you would not even have tried to form a bond with them if you did not need to. And in these circumstances, the housekeeper had to because of her work, and then it becomes like a lifelong relationship, which is somewhat like till the end of the book. There is a relationship between the daughter, like the housekeeper, the son, and the professor, which I find is a beautiful thing. So I love reading about these unexpected encounters wherein you meet somebody you did not expect to meet, and then they become a part of your life.
That is like you giving the summary of life itself. You meet.
See, every book is basically the summary of life, is it not? I'm not
Like-
sure if the Symmetry or the Prime Number book is, but most books are just the summary of life.
It's like you meet someone unexpectedly and something happens. And
I know, it's same, but how do you meet them? That is the story, right?
That is the
what was the
story.
unexpected encounter?
So I think that is a great place to end this conversation. And it was. I mean, thank you for making the time for this.
I'm sorry for all the times I could not make, but I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you for having me.
Cool, and I hope the listeners also get a chance to explore this book and have fun. You might hear a lot of disturbance. I mean, this is a public place, but I hope a large part of this conversation is easily audible. I am sure because I've also done this in the past in noisy places, and it more or less works. Just consider it as background music.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for spending time with us if you're listening till this point. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.